The acolyte robe I wore had stopped the limb of the demon from piercing through me, and I stood up despite feeling as if my chest bone had been crushed. I do not know precisely why I stood up when I should have been lying down and accepting my fate. I think I got up because I could hear the demon coming back, and if I did not get up, it would reach me while I was on the ground, and that would be worse. Bari was shouting my name from somewhere to my left. The camp was chaos. People running, falling. The sound of surge cast crackling, and heavy spells being released from the direction of the Academy mages, who had stopped retreating and were making a stand near the pyramid's base. Commander Rel's voice cutting through everything as she called for a defensive formation. All of these details entered my mind in an instant, and in the back of my head, my status screen sent an update.
Observation 21 to 22 initiate. Endurance 13 to 15 initiate.
I had never had such quick growth before. Even though I heard about how facing dangerous situations and powerful opposition could rapidly grow your power as a mage. But what was the use of this quick growth when you would not be alive to enjoy it? A crash ahead, so close to me, causing me to look up and see the demon charging at me. In the brief moment I was distracted. It had already killed Bari and Dara. Their bodies had been pulled apart the way a child breaks a doll, and Rex was nowhere to be found. The demon was heading towards me, and once more I thought I would be afraid, but I was not. Maybe this was adrenaline, or the last spark of resolve before everything crashed. I cannot tell. All I know is that I could not die on my back, only fight with everything I had. Once again, my status screen vibrated with an update, perhaps the most important update I had gotten so far, but I did not really care at this moment.
Anima depth 34 to 35 acolyte.
I pushed my staff forward and cast thread work at the charging demon. Magic is drawn from the soul itself, a substance the ancient academies call anima. Every living being has it, but only those with the right inner structure can consciously shape it. Mages don't cast spells so much as they bleed them, as every act of magic costs something real. It was not just fatigue, but a thinning of the self. We have been taught that, as the special few with high anima sensitivity and growth potential, as acolytes, we should not push ourselves too much at the beginning. Our ability to control magic was like a muscle, and we were still infants, so we should learn to walk before we ran. Even as a full mage, control was still important because if you push too hard, you stop feeling things. Push further, and you forget things, as the magic ate your soul as fuel, and you could pay the ultimate cost if you cast beyond your limit, and that is permanent soul damage, leaving a mage hollow, vacant, alive, but no longer quite there. This was what made powerful magic genuinely frightening, not just dangerous. The growth of a mage is slow and steady as we gradually expand the boundary of our souls and increase our anima depth. With all these lessons, as acolyte, we do not just cast spells carelessly. We made sure that we kept a tight lock over our anima depths, opening up a small channel for our soul power to flow through the channels of the spell. And we have been grilled many times not to go below 10% soul power. Below that is when the soul begins to wither away. I cast thread work for the first time in my life, without placing any control over my anima depth. In my mind, I would be dead before tearing my soul apart would even matter. I had not really learned to use thread work offensively. It was not really a spell designed for something like that at the acolyte level, when our anima depths were still too weak to support attack configurations. But there had always been countless thoughts in my mind as to where I could take the spell if I had the opportunity to go all out. With death rushing in my face, I did not have time to think much as I cast a dense lattice seal that Master Seraphim had shown us once, the kind designed to slow fast things, and I cast it directly in the demon's path and through every point of anima depth I had into holding it. In front of me, what resembled a bright blue net appeared for an instant before it turned colorless. The ground seemed to shake as the demon hit the seal at full speed, and it slowed the way running through deep water slows you. The demon kept fighting the lattice with the brute indifference of something that did not understand what resistance was, only that it existed and needed to be overcome. I held the seal with both hands around my staff, and my teeth clenched, and every thread of concentration I possessed, and I bought myself approximately 4 seconds. In any other time, Holding this demon would be everything that I could do without risking my soul being torn apart. But I pushed through the strain, and in those 4 seconds, I cast Spark 3 more times, targeting the jaw structure of the demon each time, trying to reproduce whatever had stopped it before. The first cast missed, but I was not surprised that it did. With the strain I was under, the second grazed it. The third hit clean, and the demon made a sound. The first sound I had heard it make, a high, flat tone that was more vibration than noise, and the pause it caused was longer this time, nearly 2 seconds. The lattice broke with a loud snap, and I heard something crack inside my soul. I had nothing left to hold it with. Although I knew I had just held this demon back for 6 seconds, I found myself smiling when I remembered the sound the demon made, because it almost sounded surprised. The demon came through the remnants of the seal I had made and crossed the distance between us in one movement, and one of its limbs caught me across the chest, and I went down again, this time without the crate to stop me, just the ground, which was significantly harder. I lay there and tried to remember how to breathe. For a moment, everything was just pain and panic, and then I could breathe again. When I opened my tear-filled eyes, the demon was standing over me and was so still, and if not for the fact that his body was covered with blood that was dropping down all over my body like rain, I would almost think it was a metallic statue. I knew my status screen was vibrating, but I could not be bothered to check what I had just gained. What would it matter? I had not emptied my soul, but it was almost impossible for me to pull out any spell. I was going to die in the next few seconds, here, on the ground at the base of a 10,000-year-old pyramid. At the age of 16, having accomplished a lattice seal, I always fumbled in practice, and 6 spark casts and very little else. There was little to be proud of here. Sure, I had done better than most acolytes in my position, but in the grander scheme of things, I had really not done anything special. I thought of my mother, of her hands, steady and precise, threading a needle, of what she would say if she knew what was happening with me here at this moment. She would say, "Get up." I tried. I genuinely tried. My arms made the attempt, and my body declined to cooperate, and the demon lowered itself toward me in the unhurried way of something that knew there was no more fight left in its prey, and I looked away from it, not wanting to see my death approach, and my eyes turned to the sky above the pyramid. The gray morning sky had turned gold at the edges while I was not paying attention. As the sun was rising, it was so beautiful, and it did not feel fair that I was about to die in such a manner. There was still too much I wanted to discover, too much of life I had not yet lived, so many mysteries and spells that I had not touched.
Not like this. Not like this.
I held my staff in both hands and poured the last of my anima into one final spark cast aim at the demon's jaw end. The limb came down and pinned me down, as it unhurriedly brought another of its long forward limbs and drove it to my chest with precision that told me it had done this before, since it managed to miss any major organs and pierced through me entirely, ensuring that I did not die instantly. I could barely gasp, as the pain was of a different order entirely from the pain of being thrown to the ground. That pain had been bright and total. This was something else that I could not describe. I heard myself scream, and the sound surprised me, because I did not know when my mouth opened to scream. There was no reason I should be so observant over my death. I should allow myself to faint, but I could not. If these were my last moments, then I did not want to miss anything, even if what was left for me was pain. The demon's other limb found the sides of my head, and my eyes widened a bit as I understood what it was doing. By all the lights in the sky, I did not want to understand, but I did. I screamed again as the grip of the demon tightened and the world tilted sideways, and there was a tearing sensation and a sound I will not describe, and the soul of an acolyte was stronger than a normal human, and for the next 10 seconds I was able to see my headless body that was still shaking as blood poured furiously from my neck. Yes, the demon had ripped my head from my body, and it slowly brought my head to its face and...
Up, up, lazy cur! Elric, I say, wake up!
My eyes snapped open, and my heart seemed to be beating 1,000 times a second. My hands found my chest and my neck, and there was no hole or pain.
What sort of dream is this? Have I damaged my soul? And am I hallucinating?
Elric, I say, wake up!
My shaking hand reached up and grabbed the floating silver orb, silencing the alarm, and I discovered my palm was wet with sweat. I mechanically tucked the silver orb into the cupboard by the side of my cot and cleaned my sweaty palms on my side as I forced myself to breathe slowly. Meditation almost activated automatically, even though this was one of the hardest auxiliary skills for me to develop in the last 2 years. Perhaps the state of my mind had been truly shaken, because I sat cross-legged and closed my eyes, and my rapidly beating heart slowly slowed down, and the panic, fear, and pain that filled me a moment before slowly bled out from my body. I had always had bad dreams once every month, and they were recurring dreams which my parents believed were due to my anima sensitivity, and they had hoped that training as a mage would give me the resources to handle my dreams, but there had never been any dream so vivid as this. How long did I spend meditating? I did not know, but the sound of the camp had grown louder, and I could hear the voices of the other acolytes. My status screen vibrated, and the message flashing just below my closed eye, pulling me away from the state of meditation.
Meditation. 14 to 18 initiate.
My eyes flew open at this drastic progress in meditation. I knew that this skill grew when you could find your center in the midst of confusion, and knowing that I could not put off any longer, I called up my status screen.
Name, Elric Vos. Age, 16. Title, Acolyte. Available titles: Death Touch, Anima Depth. 35. Acolyte. Disciplines: Threadwork 39. Acolyte. Surge 32. Acolyte. Spark 12. Initiate. Surge subskill. Auxiliary skills: Concentration 29. Initiate. Anima sensitivity 24. Initiate. Observation 23. Initiate. Inscription 19. Initiate. Meditation 18. Initiate. Endurance 19. Initiate. Cuking 13. Initiate. First Aid 8. Initiate. Cartography 6. Initiate. Blessings. Undetermined. Soul condition: Stable.
The changes in my status screen were so drastic that I dismissed it and brought it back up multiple times. But I could no longer hide the truth of what I had experienced. It was all real. My status screen only showed me the numbers, but I could feel these changes inside of me, and they were startling. Anima depth, the core stat of any mage, had grown, and that meant I could feel it. Even if this change only grew by a single point, it was like my soul had added a new inch to it. Every change in the anima depth enhanced the body as a feedback for having a stronger soul. Warriors trained their bodies, but mages were the greatest power in the world because even without training their bodies, the increasing strength of their anima depth ensured their bodies were always growing stronger. Something about having a shell strong enough to hold a powerful soul, and this was what all acolytes were trained to understand, that their bodies were not what was truly important, only their soul. Already, I could see farther than most people ever could. I have not gotten sick in 10 years, and even though it took a while for cuts to heal, there was usually no scar left behind as the power of our growing soul forced our body perfection. Still, all of these fantastic changes I was feeling in my body were also greatly enhanced by the fact that so many of my auxiliary skills had grown as well. My cooking had grown by 1 point, my concentration and observation grew by 2 points, my meditation grew by 4 points, and most shocking of all was my endurance, which grew by a whopping 6 points. All of these changes across my body could not be faked, and I was used to slow growth, same as everyone else, but I guess this was the sort of progress you made at the edge of death, where you did not expect to live. I sat with the status screen open for a long time, not reading it anymore, just looking at it the way you look at something after the initial shock has passed, and you are trying to decide what relationship you intend to have with it going forward. What drew my attention a bit was my spark, which had grown quite a bit, and I remember that of all my spells, it seemed to have done better than I expected, despite it being so low cost that I could spam it as much as I wanted. The numbers were real. The title was real. Death touched. I had not chosen it, had not been offered selection. It had simply appeared the way titles apparently appeared when the world decided something significant had happened to you. The world had decided that dying and returning qualified. Then the sound like a massive foghorn resounded, and I could feel it touch the core of my being and stir my soul. The light streaming into my tent turned red, and I knew that I had spent too long just understanding and adjusting to the changes that had happened to me, and the danger was already here. From the time I spent meditating to going through my status screen, the world had not stood still. All across my body, goosebumps rose all over my flesh. I hated to admit it, but I suddenly began to panic as the image of my body flopping around without its head was branded to my consciousness, and the pain of being thrown around and impaled had not fully dissipated from my mind. The thought of being brutally killed like this again made me freeze in place, and when the sound of screaming and spells being thrown around reached my ears, only then did I think to move. My mind went straight to Bari, my best friend, and Dara, even Rex. I should find them so we could run, and a massive shape tore through my tent, and I could barely discern the shape of the demon before it tore through my raised arms, plunged its 2 front limbs into my body, and tore me into 4 pieces. I could not even scream, only lie there in pieces, until blood covered my eyes and death took me again.
Up, up, lazy cur. Elric, I say, wake up!
I shot up from the bed, my hand seizing the floating silver orb, and my heart beating faster than normal. This is the second time I had died, and I wished it had become easier, but it did not. The trauma only compounded. There were voices at a conversational volume, the clank of instruments being prepared for the day's work, the smell of cooked fire smoke drifting through the canvas. Somewhere, Pell was complaining about something. He was always complaining about something, and every morning for as long as I had been on this expedition, I had found it mildly irritating, and this morning I found it the most comforting sound I had ever heard. Pell was alive. Dara was alive. Bari was alive, and his sock still had a hole in it, and he did not know that, less than an hour ago, or perhaps many hours ago, or perhaps no time at all, I did not yet understand mechanics. Something had pulled him apart. Rex was alive, and wherever he had gone when the demons came, he was here now, probably arranging his hair. Commander Rel was alive. Scholar Orith was alive, and was almost certainly already at the pyramid's base with his private instrument pressed against the black surface, listening to whatever it was he heard through it. They were all alive. For now, I pressed my palms flat on my knees and looked at the wall of my tent and thought with the careful deliberateness of someone who has just had something very large confirmed and needs to organize their response to it before it becomes overwhelming. Facts in order. First, I had died. Twice. Not dreamed of dying. Not nearly died. The title death touched and the skill gains that had survived the reset and the condition of my mental state from the previous loop, all of it confirmed what my body had already known when I woke with my hands at my throat. Second, the world had reset. Not my memory. Not a dream. The world, the camp, the people in it, the pyramid, the hour, had returned to a fixed point, and I had returned with it, carrying everything I had learned and gained. Third, this would happen again. The ground would split. The demons would come. Everyone would die, unless I did something different. A thought like this seemed to be too massive for an acolyte, but I could not allow myself to think anything else, or I would be frozen in place like before and butchered in my tent. I did not perform my usual morning routine of cleaning and grooming and careful preparation, though some part of me noted that the robe still needed straightening, and the ashwood still needed the knots at the grip checked. I went to my staff and picked it up and held it and felt the 3 charms settle. My sister, Mel. My mother, Rosa. My father, Janice. Admiring past victories is one way to slowly lose sight of the future. The thought hit me in the head. Right. Good. I cannot stand here deliberating about the past. What did I know? I knew the first demon's weakness, if it could even be called a weakness. The pale sensory structures along its jaw. Spark, which caused an electrical discharge, caused full-body paralysis when it connected cleanly. I remembered it got me 2 full seconds when I clearly hit them, but the lattice seal bought 4 seconds but cost too much. Net result, clean spark hits would buy me more time than trying to seal the demon. Spark had grown to 12, higher than it had ever been, when it was 9, and it meant that the paralysis may be longer as the skill grew, but I knew there would not be many drastic changes, not while the skill was still so weak at the initiate level. Still, I expected that spark should hold the demon for longer, and more spark casts meant longer pauses. which meant more time. More time meant more casts. More casts meant a higher skill growth. Higher skill rank meant longer pauses, as the demon was frozen in place. The logic was circular, and it was also the only logic available to me, so I was going to follow it until it stopped working or until something changed. Perhaps I should invest more in thread working or casting surge, but that would simply wipe out all my anima depth after a single cast, and for now, it was useless to me. The longer I survive, the more I can learn and grow. I picked up the small notebook I use for cartography measurements and found a clean page and wrote 3 things. Objective 1. Land at least 10 clean spark hits on the jaw structure. Objective 2. Determine how many hits bring it down, then cast a surge spell with everything I have. Objective 3. Survive long enough to see what comes after. This was a grim list, but it was the only one I had. I closed the notebook and tucked it inside my robe. I went through my morning routine with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had things to do and could not afford to let feelings slow them down. The robe straightened, the staff checked, the 3 charms confirmed, each one briefly held and released. It took less time than usual because I was not being careful. I was being fast, and fast was what the hour required. When I pushed open the tent flap and stepped out, the camp was already well into its morning. I had lost time to the meditation, and the thinking and the sitting with my status screen, and the cost of that was immediately visible. Even though it was better than the second time I died, I still spent more time than I did during my first loop. The cook fire had been burning long enough that the smoke had thinned and the embers were working rather than the flame, and around it, the 3 other acolytes were already seated with their bowls, and Aldous had apparently done his best and retreated, leaving the porridge to fend for itself. Bari saw me, and he raised a spoon in greeting, without interrupting the elaborate complaint he was in the middle of delivering to no one in particular about the texture of the porridge, which he described as reminiscent of wet sand that had made poor decisions. Dara looked up from her bowl, then at the position of the light, then back at me with a particular expression she reserved for things that did not quite add up.
You slept late,
She said.
I had a dream.
I said. Rex did not look up from his bowl, and it still amazed me that this noble brat could eat the same slop as the rest of us. Perhaps I underestimate him.
The porridge is worse than yesterday.
He said to the fire. I sat down and accepted the bowl Bari held out to me. He had apparently taken the liberty of serving everyone, including a portion set aside with a flat piece of bark over the top, to keep it warm, which was either considerate or an indication that he had known I would be late, which with Bari was sometimes the same thing. I tasted it, and Rex was right. It was worse than yesterday. I picked up the ladle, found the time where I had seen it the morning before, tucked behind the left supply crate, no label, and set about fixing what could be fixed.
You don't have to do that.
Dara said.
I know.
I said.
Cooking 13 to 15. Initiate.
2 ranks from time and intention. I looked at the notification and felt the same thing I felt looking at the demon's surprised expression after the 3rd spark hit, the small, specific satisfaction of a thing noticed and acted on and improved, however slightly, in a morning that was going to get significantly worse before it ended, most likely in my death. I served myself in the improved pot and sat back down and ate and let the sounds of the camp settle around me. Bari was still complaining, now about the hole in his sock, which had apparently grown. Dara was watching the pyramid with the focused quiet of someone working through a problem. Rex had finished his porridge and was looking at Scholar Orith at the eastern face, the old man already at the pyramid's surface with his private instrument pressed flat against the black stone, white head bowed. Everything exactly as it had been. Everything exactly as it was going to stop being in less than an hour. I ate my porridge and looked at my notebook tucked inside my robe and thought about the intricacies of spark casting and the 3 clear objectives written in my own hand. Spark was not truly pursued by acolytes, as it took a while before it showed its strength, and most would focus on Surge, which was the bread and butter of most mages and acolyte, because it was one of the few spells that could hasten the development of anima depth, and it was a basis from which an acolyte selected the discipline they would be pursuing all their life, either elemental or any other magical fields like space or even time. Surge was raw anima expelled outward as force, heat, or light. It was high cost, high impact, and very terrible for beginner soul reserves. After I had brought my surge level to Acolyte, the process for selecting my discipline was next. However, Acolytes were supposed to select their discipline in their 3rd year, but I always believed in early preparation and decided to focus on 3 elemental disciplines and 1 occultic discipline to find out which one suited me the best and pursue it all my life. Whether by luck or coincidence, I had selected Spark to be the first discipline I learned, knowing that it fell under the lightning elemental discipline, and decided to practice with it until it was around level 20 initiate before moving on to another elemental discipline. My plan was that before the 3rd year began, I would have practiced all 4 disciplines to a sufficient level, and then choose the one that I was the best at and was most passionate about pursuing until I could become a full-blown mage. As it turned out, Spark became the only tool that had the most effect in delaying these demons in my skill list, and I decided to go through the understanding of the spell in a corner of my mind. I was lucky that it was a rather simple one, but even the simplest spells also contain profound depths. My head was bowed, and I did not look at the pyramid yet because I was not ready, and I did not tell anyone what was coming because I did not yet know how, and the morning carried on around me exactly as it always did. Even if I told them, what was the use? I did not think I would survive the next hour yet, and until I could make meaningful changes, there was no need for me to bother. I had work to do. The bowl was empty before I tasted the last few spoonfuls. My mind was already elsewhere, running through the sequence of violence that was coming, checking the variables, organizing the hour into sections the way my mother organized her thread by color and weight before beginning a new piece of work. She always said that the preparation was half the making. I was beginning to understand what she meant in ways she had not intended. I realized that the most important thing I needed to do was to gain more information and not die so quickly. Without this, I was just flailing around like a headless chicken, cleaning my mouth with the back of my sleeves, knowing that any stain would simply slide off my acolyte robe. I set the bowl down and looked at the pyramid. I am ready now, I think. It was the same pyramid it had always been, black, smooth, enormous, drinking the morning light without returning any of it. But I looked at it differently this morning than I had the 2 mornings before. The first morning, I had looked at it with awe. The second morning, I had not even seen it. And this morning, I was looking at it like a complicated equation that needed solving. It was still larger than my ability to fully process. It was still 10,000 years old, and made of something that was not quite stone and had no seams and no weathering. None of that had changed. What had changed was that I now knew what was underneath it. I wonder if everything that was happening to me, the loop, was related to this pyramid. A thought entered my head at this moment. 2. What if I was not the only one experiencing this loop?
You have that look again.
Bari said, from beside me.
What look? The one where you are thinking about something you are not going to tell anyone.
He collected my empty bowl with the easy efficiency of someone who had decided that tidying up after people was simply part of how he moved through the world.
You had it yesterday, too, right before we were assigned to our researchers. Mage Torvin noticed. He mentioned it to me.
I arched my brow, surprised that a mage would be interested in me enough to mention it to Bari.
Oh, what did he say? He said.
Bari adopted a voice of excessive gravity.
That young Voss has the look of a man carrying a weight he has not yet decided to put down.
He dropped the voice.
He has a gift for description, Torvin. Comes with the mustache, I think. Men with mustaches like that develop an eye for the human condition.
I almost smiled, but I could not. Something about what Bari said to me seemed innocent and funny, but I could not help but feel a chill at the same time. It was as if my soul had picked up a subtext that I was still not comprehending. Finally, I looked at the distance before turning to Bari.
I am going to do something this morning,
I said.
Before we report to our researchers.
Bari waited. With Bari, waiting was not passive. It was an active and generous thing, the deliberate clearing of space for whatever came next.
I want to get closer to the pyramid,
I said, which was true and also not the full truth, and was as much as I was prepared to say.
The south face, the ground near the survey markers.
Bari looked at me for a moment, then at the pyramid, then back at me.
Commander Rel said the south face was off-limits to acolytes until the primary measurements were complete.
He said.
I know.
Another pause. Then Bari stood, brushed invisible dust from his knees. The hole in his sock caught briefly on a splint of the crate, and he freed it with the patience of a man long reconciled to the relationship between himself and that particular sock, and said,
Well, I have nothing better to do for the next 20 minutes. You don't have to come, no.
He agreed pleasantly.
I don't, but I am coming anyway.
We crossed the camp in the early morning light, moving with the purposeful casualness of people who had somewhere to be and had not yet been told they were not supposed to be there. I had learned in 2 years at the academy that purposeful casualness was the single most effective tool available to a person of limited authority who needed to be somewhere they were not strictly permitted.